Evening, this is Chat UTD. This is a video I was been thinking of doing for some time. My top 10 Manchester United players. It's not the top 10 in terms of the best, it's the players I feel the most connection to and have had the biggest impact on me over the years. It's not a team with a formation, there's not 11 players in it, there's 10 players in it, so it's not like a 4-3-2 or something like that. It's just literally the players that have had the biggest impact on me from 10 to 1. Very subjective, I'm aware, but it's nice to do it because it makes me realise how lucky I am to have seen so many great players down the years, and it was difficult to narrow it down to 10. So, here we go. Number 10, Nemanja Vidic. One of the best defenders I've ever seen at United. Brave, committed, motivated, great communicator with his teammates, demanded the best of himself and those around him. Scored the odd goal, always seemed to be in the right place at the right time, was a bargain, and whenever I watched him, I always thought we're going to be all right because he's one of the ones that's in the team. Felt like you could trust him and that he understood what it meant to play for United from a very, very early stage. And captained us to some great times and was part of big, big achievements at United. A bona fide legend as far as I'm concerned. Number 9, best goalkeeper I've ever seen, Peter Schmeichel. I was at his debut, which was against Republic of Ireland 11 in the Sir Matt Busby testimonial in 1991. I would have been 11, nearly 12. I've never seen a goalkeeper throw the ball as far as he could throw it, and remember thinking, Jesus, he's a monster. He's like Ivan Drago from Rocky IV, and he could kick it the full length of the pitch without even extending himself. And then, as you started watching him actually play for the team, I mean, he didn't have a lot to do for long periods of his career at United because we were always quite dominant. But when he had to be there, he made some big, big saves at big moments for United. He had that famous star shape that he did. He's the first goalkeeper that I remember watching that would make the goal look small for the striker. The striker's obviously got the momentum, they're running at pace, and they've got a massive goal to aim for, but when Schmeichel was in net, it must have looked tiny. He was gobby, he was abrasive, he was brash, and all that added to it. Brilliant. Best goalkeeper the Premier League's had, in my opinion. Disappointed he went to City, and disappointed at his antics when we played City, and he was celebrating, cartwheeling, whatever he did in front of the United fans. That was out of order, which is probably why he's further down the list than maybe he might have been. Number 8, Mark Hughes. When I first started watching United in the late 80s, the two players that stood out in that team were Mark Hughes and Brian Robson. And Hughes was strong. He would score ridiculous goals. Goals that made you go, oh my God, I can't believe he's just scored that. Famous for volleys, but he'd score some from distance that were outrageous. Bit of a standard bearer for me because his standards were high even when the team wasn't that good. And he was starved of service for years until Eric got there, really. And the weight of the world was on his shoulders until Eric got there. When Eric did arrive, I thought we saw a different side to Hughes. I thought it brought out the finesse that he has in his game, that more subtle qualities that he had. Because he's a very intelligent football player. When you speak to some people about Hughes, their immediate first impression is brute force and ignorance, just strong as fuck. Elbow people, dirty, score goals where he just absolutely smashes it. And yeah, all that was part of his game. But there was more to it than that. He had incredible football intelligence, a great brain, and him and Cantona, you could say probably shouldn't have worked, and yet it worked beautifully. Like Tevez and Rooney. On the face of it, you'd say, how's that going to work? And it worked amazingly well. Hughes and Cantona together were just both very, very intelligent players who trusted each other, who liked each other, who had a great vibe. And Hughes went up levels, I thought, when Eric arrived. And that was probably dormant, waiting to go. The scorer of important goals. I mentioned it in a video a few weeks ago. The Nottingham Forest goal. I know that wasn't a goal that he scored, but he's the one that pings it in behind Mark Robins, so he could assist as well. But in terms of scoring important goals, Oldham FA Cup semi-final in 1994, Barcelona in the 1991 Cup Winners' Cup final where he took it round the keeper, took it to an angle where was it Brian Moore that was commentating? And he was like, "Oh, he's gone too far. The angle's too hard, or is it?" And he's in the net. Phenomenal goal. I remember even this, people will think this isn't that important, but there's a goal that season in the League Cup against Liverpool where he received the ball probably about 15 yards into Liverpool's half. He had about 3 or 4 players around him. He just got himself strong, got his elbows out, held the 3 players off, turned and just absolutely spanked it past Bruce Grobbelaar. Just hard, tough, legs like freaking tree trunks. Dirty when he needed to be. One of my abiding memories of Hughes, for all the brilliant goals he scored and how great he was at times, was David Tootle, who played for Sheffield United. It was an FA Cup game, and Hughes just literally kicked him up the arse and got sent off for it. There's something quite endearing about that. Maybe that's just me. Really disappointed he went and managed City, but even more disappointed in the way that he carried himself about United around that time. And after that time, I remember watching when we played Stoke, and it was David Moyes was our manager, and Hughes just looked like he had a massive chip on his shoulder against United. And I went through a stage of really disliking him and thinking, what the fuck have you got a problem with us for? We made your career. That's softened recently in that he seems to talk quite warmly about us again now, and rightly he should, because we did a lot for him and he did a lot for us. And I know he wasn't maybe massively happy with the way it all ended at United, but the bulk of his career was at our club, and he deserves to be mentioned for me as a legend of United. And I'm glad that now I feel like I can say that again, because there was a period where I thought he was a bit of a dick, but he certainly is in my top 10. Number 7 is Ryan Giggs. You just have to respect the career he had. He made his debut in 1991. He didn't retire until 2014. He reinvented himself God knows how many times, because he was a flying, unpredictable winger. Then injuries caught up with him a little bit and he had to change the way he played on the wing. Then he became a centre midfield player in his early 30s and was running the show from centre midfield. Brilliant player in centre midfield. Then he kind of became a hybrid where he would kind of do a little bit of both. And it was more his influence on the team that the manager wanted him in the team for. But you're looking at a guy at 38, 39, in title-winning teams, having a strong influence on title-winning teams. I watched United against Olympiacos in the David Moyes season. We were 2-0 down from the first leg. Me and my mate went in the Stretford end, and my nephew. Me and my mate and my nephew. We had a few beers before we went. It was a crackling atmosphere. Brilliant. Van Persie scored a hat-trick and we won 3-0, but the best player on the pitch was Ryan Giggs. He was everywhere. And he would have been 40, 41. He hadn't played for about 5 or 6 weeks. I think Moyes was using him quite sparingly, so you'd think he was a bit rusty. I remember watching, and you see it more when you're at the game, you're like, what's he on? Like, how old is he? People now mention Rashford and talk about him being from Manchester, and that's a reason to support him. Ryan Giggs supported United as a kid, from the Manchester area. That's what a Manc looks like playing for Man United. Never let us down. And obviously the goal against Arsenal is the one that stands out in one of the biggest moments in our biggest ever season, our best ever season, winning the treble. So, got up to things off the pitch which I'm not overly enamoured with, and maybe that's why he's a bit further down the list than perhaps he might have been, but no doubt a United legend, and people won't believe it. I've got a hat on now, but my hairline's horrific. But when I was a kid, or in my teens, my hair and his hair were quite similar. I had curly hair, so I did the Giggsy curtains, and had 11 gigs on my back, and modelled myself on him a little bit back in the day as well. So there's that little kinship as well. Number 6 is David Beckham. Bex was obviously a Cockney, well, from down south, but for me he's one of our lads. He's as Mancunian as Ryan Giggs or Gary Neville or whoever, because he supported United as a kid. I love the story that his dad, like we all do as United fans, you get a son and you're like, he's going to play for United. And then it happened for him. What an amazing story. That, you know, there's those video reels of him in the old 70s kits kicking a ball about in his back garden. I love that. It's a fantastic story. And I know he became this global superstar, but he never ever lost his connection with the United fans. And I feel like he always appreciated us. When he first came onto the scene, one of my abiding memories of him, apart from how he scored brilliant goals, free kicks were fantastic, crossing was brilliant, but one of my abiding memories was one of his first goals. Cantona rushed over to him and he idolised Eric, and Cantona grabbed him, and you can see the joy on Beckham's face. And at the time I would have been about 16, 17, and he's us. He's us on the pitch. He's representing us. The joy to play for Manchester United. And I don't know if anyone would have seen it, but a few years ago, I think it probably was 2019, it would make sense if it was a treble anniversary game, and they played Munich United 11 against the Bayern Munich 11, and Beckham played, and he scored, and he's still got that youthful, joyful look on his face. It's like he loves United. He's forgiven Ferguson when other people probably wouldn't have done. The treble season, some of the crosses to Dwight Yorke. People rightly talk about Yorke and Cole, but go back and look at the review of that season. How many times Beckham found Dwight Yorke? The abuse he took after the 98 World Cup. I went to a lot of games that 98-99 season. I went to a lot of away games, and we had his back, and he knew we had his back, and he appreciated it. And he just went on to have a fantastic career. And he's emotional about United, and I'm emotional about United, so I like that as well. Superb player, great guy, love Beckham. Number 5, Cristiano Ronaldo. Without doubt, the best player I've ever seen play for United, but not any higher than number 5 in my affections, because first of all, he left in his pomp. He left in his prime. He chose to leave in his prime. And secondly, when he came back, I don't think he particularly covered himself in glory, although I agree with a lot of the things he said and a lot of the things he stood for. He didn't go about it in the right way. Another player where I was lucky enough to be at his debut against Bolton, and he came on after 70 minutes and we were 1-0 up. And we won 4-0. And he just scintillated everybody. And there was a guy sat, I was here, my mate was there, and there was an old geezer a seat away from my mate. And the old geezer said, "That's the best debut I've seen since George Best." And me and my mate are like, "Steady on, flipping out." The old geezer was right. I spoke before about Giggs reinventing himself. in his 30s. Ronaldo reinvented himself in his early 20s to become this machine, this monster, because he wasn't that when he first came. And I like a story where there's a little bit of adversity. And I think when Ronaldo first came, he was a very talented player. You could see that. But as teams started to work him out, especially in the Premier League, where there's savvy defenders who are crap, but will just kick you if they need to, they worked him out, and he had a spell where it was like he was on the bench quite a bit, and he still came on and made a difference, but there was a bit of doubt about him. And I love the story that Keane and Ferdinand and the senior players in the team basically took it upon themselves to kick the crap out of him in training. The dressing room took charge and said, "You're going to have to toughen up, son." And I love that. And I love that it worked. And that it wasn't all plain sailing. People look at it and say, Ronaldo is a legend. Yeah, he is. He had to work for it. He had to take kicks. He had to get it. Again, Ferguson always used to say about him, he got kicked, he got back up, he wanted the ball again. That's courage. And then obviously the 2006 to 7 season when we won the league back, he scored 23 goals, I think it was, from the wing, and people thought that was incredible. The next season he scored 42. He scored the goal in the Champions League final against Chelsea. He missed the penalty, fair enough. He wanted to go after that season. He stayed for an extra season. He scored 30, 31, 32, something like that in the season of 2008, 2009. And he missed the first month, if I remember rightly, because he was seeing his backside. So, incredibly talented boy, but also you look at his physique. That takes work. That takes a lot of work. And then when he came back, I was dead excited when he came back. And he was still head and shoulders above anybody else in the team, even when he came back. But the players around him aren't strong enough to deal with what he expected of them. So it just didn't work. And he didn't really fit what we were trying to do at the time. It was the wrong time for him probably to come back. But he was still a class act in terms of his qualities. But unfortunately, some of the stuff like walking down the tunnel and not watching the rest of the game and refusing to come off the bench and things, that's not good. That's not good at all. Number 4, Brian Robson, Captain Marvel. Again, I'll say it, when I first started watching United in the late 80s, the only 2 players we had that the rest of Division 1, as it was at that time, would want was Mark Hughes and Brian Robson, but it was particularly Brian Robson. Any team in Europe would have wanted Brian Robson. If you keep in mind that he came in the very early 80s, he won an FA Cup in 1983, he won an FA Cup in 1985, and then from 85 until 90, English teams weren't allowed in Europe. He could have gone anywhere. Any team would have bought him in Europe, and he didn't want to because he loved United. In the early 90s, when we started to win stuff and then we became champions in 93 and then 94 as well, people forget he was in his mid-30s. But it didn't look like that because he was still so good. It's not even a memory because I don't remember it. I'm too young to remember it, but I've seen it enough times on YouTube. It was against Liverpool in the semi-final in 1985 at Main Road, and he was chairlifted off by the United fans, and the United fans were singing "We love United, we do," and he had a scarf around his head and he's going like that, singing. He got it. He loved United. He's an ambassador for the club now. We missed him so much when he didn't play, and he made such a difference when he came back. But he wasn't getting injured because he was soft. He was injured because he was so brave. I like the fact that he had that side to him, that little bit of an edge. He liked a beer and stuff, and that's what people talk about Rashford and say, well, he went out and got pissed in Belfast. That's not a big deal. No, it's not a big deal at all. But it's how you carry stuff like that. So if you have the chance, read Lee Sharp's autobiography, because he tells many stories, but it's about Robson. But he sort of talks about Robson and the fact that he used to go out on these stupid drinking sessions when they were allowed to, and the next morning Ferguson knew they'd been out, so he'd put them through this punishing regime where they'd be doing laps of the training pitch or whatever, Sharpie would say Robson was always at the front, out of bloody mindedness, sweating it out, coming out of his pores because he was so pissed the night before. And Sharpie went to Ferguson apparently at some point, and Ferguson called him in and said, "You're going out too much." And Sharpie said, "Well, what about Robbo? He's the captain. He's always out." And Ferguson said words to the effect of, "Don't compare yourself to Robson. He's an absolute freak." And he meant that in the nicest possible way. And he was a freak because his stamina, his engine was ridiculous. But I like that. I like that imperfection. I like that he wasn't just a straight-laced stiff. He was a guy that went out and got pissed and then could play to the levels that he would play at and have the influence that he had. Love him. Love Robson. Number 3, Ruud van Nistelrooy. My favourite ever striker, as in scoring goal striker, that's played for United. Again, it's an imperfect story. He was supposed to come a year before he did. He had a nearly career-threatening injury, nearly career-ending injury. He came back. Ferguson waited for him. He came back, and then I had a season ticket when he played for us. And when you're there, you can see exactly what he does. Now, Ferguson changed things. We'd always played 4-4-2. With Ruud, he played him one up front with Scholes in behind him. And he was a hybrid 10 and 9 in one, and people don't appreciate that. People just think he was a goal scorer. When you watch the game, he would come to the halfway line and receive the ball and get kicked the crap out of from 2 defenders behind him, kicking lumps out of him. And he received the ball, he'd hold them off, and he was strong and he was dirty when he needed to be. And he'd lay it off, and people didn't think Van Nistelrooy was quick. 3 seconds later, he's in the box, getting on the end of the cross, scoring the goal. He was, for me, underrated. And I know he scored loads of goals and people love him, but I still think he was underrated. The guy was class, absolute class. Got United, loved United. Scored so many goals and so many important goals, and it's a travesty he only won 1 Premier League title because he deserved more. His standards were through the roof. He had an edge to him. He probably was a bit arrogant. I think he did want to go to Madrid in the end, and that hurts a little bit. But just loved Ruud, loved him. Number 2. I can't even believe this guy's number 2. Eric Cantona. When Cantona signed for us in November 1992, I couldn't believe it. In September of 1992, my mate said to me, "If you could sign anyone for United, who would it be?" And by that point, remember, there wasn't transfer windows. I think you could sign anyone up until about April. Who would you sign if you could sign anybody? And I said, Cantona. And he was like, "I'm not going to sign Cantona. He plays for Leeds. They've just won the league. He's not going to come to United." And I said, "No, I know he's not going to come to United, but if you're asking me, who would you want? It would be Cantona." November 1992, I get home from school, teletext, as it was then. Page 140, if I remember rightly. Cantona signs for United. What? And it's on the news. Cantona signed for United. And I was just filled with joy. Just like, this is it. This is the one, as the Stone Roses say. We're going to do it. Even as a young kid, you just knew that this is going to work. And the influence, the impact, the way he made other players around him even better than they already were. He was perfect for us. His personality, his enigmatic side of himself, his quirks, the fact that he had his collar up, just little things that because people say it's little things, it's not. They make the character that you are. And he didn't work at it. He's just Eric Cantona. Like he said in that film, I'm not a man, I'm Cantona. And I knew what he meant by that. And if you know, you know. The fact he kicked the shit out of a fan who called his mum a whore and he wasn't having it. Brilliant. Then released a video saying he should have hit him harder or whatever he said. His only regret was that he didn't hit him harder. Came back, 95, 96. Rusty for the first few months when he came back. All he really scored was penalties when he first came back. But then he scored 20 odd goals that season. And him and Schmeichel in particular pretty much won us that double. Scored the winning goal in the FA Cup final in the dying seconds against Liverpool. Called it a day because he had so much integrity. He knew he didn't want it anymore, and he just said, "I can't." He didn't say this, but I suppose symbolically what he said was, "I can't cheat this club. So if I'm not interested in it anymore, I can't lie to you. I'm just gonna have to go and do something else." And did. Broke my heart, but at least he was honest. I remember going to Gothenburg in 1994 Champions League group game with me and my dad. It was a last minute thing. Don't worry, you got a ticket from, but we got a ticket. And we stayed overnight on the Tuesday and we played on the Wednesday. And on the Wednesday, we went in this pub called the Old Dubliner in Gothenburg. You've got to imagine I've just turned 15 years old. Swedish lager flying down your neck like no tomorrow, surrounded by die-hard Reds, most of which were in Cantona masks, singing Cantona songs all afternoon. And we've only got 3 or 4 of them, the songs, but just on repeat. Stood on tables, singing songs. My dad, with a crew of people that he'd got to know. You just keep lining them up, Dad. As long as you keep bringing me the beers, I'm happy. That was my first introduction to a United away game. And I remember thinking, we lost 3-1, we were crap. And it pretty much confirmed that we were out of the Champions League. And as we were travelling back that night, flying home, I just thought, this is me. This is me. And that's a Cantona memory, even though it was nothing to do with him on the pitch, really. Special. Bought Pete Boyle's CD that he did of Cantona songs. I've got somewhere, but I don't know where it is. Very, very, very special. If you think of what Cantona did in 5 years, and I don't want to bring the mood down because this is great going down memory lane, but you think about Phil Jones was at United for double the amount of time Cantona was there. Harry Maguire, about now, has been at United for the same length of time as Cantona. Martial's been there for longer. It's incredible when you think of the impact he had in the time that he was there. And he's still revered now, and we still sing songs about him now, all these years later, and he was only at the club for 5 years. It's ridiculous impact. Number 1, Roy Keane. Almost speechless about what Roy Keane means to me as a football player. Standard bearer, strong expectations, the manager on the pitch. Always felt that while he's there, everything's going to be all right. He might try and say otherwise now because it didn't end very well at United, but he loved everything about United. I've heard him in an interview saying when he first joined, he's just like, I love the kit, I love where it is, I love the stadium, I love my teammates. It was like, and I still think that in his heart of hearts he feels that way now. It's difficult to describe with Keane why he's my favourite, because it's quite abstract, non-tangible stuff. It's the feeling I get when I watched him play for United, and even when he talks now on Sky, I tune in to Sky or look at it. I haven't got Sky anymore, so generally speaking, would look at it retrospectively on YouTube. I want to hear what he says. He's captivating. He's honest. He's himself. He's one of those people that doesn't need to be anybody else. Not trying to impress people, not trying to be something he's not. And he was like that on the pitch. I remember in 1997 when he first became the captain, me and one of my mates always laugh about this. We still talk about it now. It was the first time he was captain. At the end of a match of the day, at the end of the game, they did a post-match interview with him. He said, "Roy, what's different about being captain?" And he said, "Well, it's not that different really. You just go for a toss before the game." And then smiled with this devilment in his eyes because he knew, obviously, what he was saying. Um, like Robson, liked a beer, got himself in scrapes, hard, aggressive, antagonistic, but set such high standards for everyone else. And just a few little memories, and I'm sure you've got your own, but obviously Juventus in the semi-final in '99. I just remember we played Sunderland away in, I think it was 2002 to 2003 season, and Phil Neville, Keane just absolutely went for him. And I can't remember what Phil Neville had done wrong. It wasn't anything major, but Keane absolutely lost his shit with him. And Phil Neville kind of looks at and starts to have a little bit back, and then thinks, "Fuck, maybe that wasn't a good idea," and backs back off again. But it's again influence. And when I had my season ticket and I watched him, you appreciate it even more. You're like, "Fuck me, this guy's good. He's so much better than people give him credit for. He's so much more intelligent as a football player than people give him credit for." I remember watching John O'Shea. If it wasn't his debut, it was one of his first games against West Ham. And Keane was, obviously, John O'Shea's centre back at the time. Keane's playing midfield. Keane just sat 3 or 4 yards deeper and basically talked him through the game. Just leadership, just natural leadership. Ferguson hadn't told him to do that. He just did it. And if you listen to him now, he talks a lot about, "Oh, look, I had good teammates. I was lucky to have this. I was lucky to have that." Undersells himself massively. And this might be controversial, but the thing with Haaland, it was brilliant as far as I'm concerned. That kind of, again, we're all people trying to make our way in the world. Because you're on X amount of money doesn't mean you're not going to do things that maybe you shouldn't really do. So Haaland stood over you and taken the piss out of you a few years earlier. You've remembered it to such a degree that when he gets the ball, we're already champions in that game. Nothing really to lose. If I'm suspended, it doesn't matter. He goes and absolutely nails him and then stands over him and calls him the C word. And you could say, that's terrible. It's a terrible example to set people or whatever. I was out of my seat celebrating it like a goal. Whenever I see it now, I think, yeah, you had that coming, you arrogant piece of shit. Devilment, everything, quality. And people say don't meet your heroes. And I can't remember if I've shared this with you before, but it's not like I've got this ready. This is just on my desk because it's pride of place on my desk. It's me and Roy there. At an audience with Roy Keane just before COVID times with my mate for his 40th, and you got a picture taken with him, you got to shake his hand, you got to ask a question, and he was quality. He was brilliant. No edge to him, exactly as you would expect him to be. Yeah, for me, and I know that I mentioned Brian Robson before, and I saw Keane when I was at an age when I probably understood football more than I knew it when Robson was there. So it's not like for like, but Keane's the best captain I've ever seen at United. And if you could have one player that you could transport into this current team because of the influence he would have over everybody in it, or he'd just clear house and they'd all have to go because they couldn't tolerate him, it would be Roy Keane. So there we go. It's great to go down memory lane because I support a club that is down the road really effectively from where I live. My dad is from Manchester and grew up supporting them, and I could have been born anywhere. And that's my team, that's my club, that's authentically my club. I didn't start supporting them because we won stuff. I started supporting them because I loved them from the minute I stepped out of my mum's car when I got onto the forecourt of Old Trafford. And to go back and look at all of those players is special. absentees there that you're thinking, how the hell have you not got Rooney, like Scholes, whoever? But it's mine. It's my number. It's my top 10, and I have my reasons which I've given for why they're there. It's about connection. It's about emotional connection. It's about impact that those players have had on me, and that's mine. What's yours? Glazers out.